I have attended many dinners in my 72 years on this earth. Business dinners in glass towers, holiday dinners around tables, so crowded you could barely lift your fork. Dinners that sealed million-dollar deals and dinners that quietly ended lifelong friendships. But there is one dinner I will carry with me until the day I die, not because of the food, and not because of the conversation, but because of the moment I watched my wife of 47 years carry a stack of dirty dishes into the kitchen, while her daughter-in-law sat at the head of the table, legs crossed, examining her manicure without a single word of thanks. That was the night everything changed. My name is Gerald. My wife's name is Helen. And my daughter-in-law's name is Renata, a woman who walked into our family 12 years ago wearing a brilliant smile, and departed every room leaving a trail of quiet devastation behind her. Renata had a gift. She could look a person directly in the eyes, while simultaneously making them feel entirely invisible. She did it to waitstaff at restaurants. She did it to our neighbors. And for years she did it to Helen, the woman who had welcomed her into our home, taught her to make the lamb roast she now served at her own dinner parties, and who quietly mended every tear in our family fabric that Renata's sharp edges left behind. Before I tell you what we did, and exactly how the evening ended, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. And if you have ever had to stand up for someone you love against a person who believed they were untouchable, hit the like button. You already know this story is going to feel very satisfying. To understand that dinner, you have to understand the years that led up to it. Renata married our son, Paul, in the autumn 12 years ago. Paul is a good man, generous, hardworking, and tragically blind to the person he chose to share his life with. He saw what Renata wanted him to see, an ambitious, polished woman who knew exactly what she wanted. What he did not see, what none of us fully understood until it was too late, was that what Renata wanted was a family she could rearrange to suit herself. It started small, the way it always does. She would arrive at our Sunday dinners 40 minutes late without apology, then spend the meal redirecting every conversation back toward herself. She would compliment Helen's cooking with the thin, condescending praise of a food critic who had begrudgingly awarded 2 stars instead of the expected one. She reorganized family holidays without consulting anyone, then acted wounded when we pointed out we had prior plans. But the worst of it, the part that lit a slow fire behind Helen's gentle eyes, was the way Renata treated her like hired help. Helen would spend Friday nights preparing elaborate meals because she loved feeding her family. She found deep joy in a properly set table, in the smell of a slow-cooked roast, in the warm, particular chaos of a house full of grandchildren. And Renata would arrive, accept a full plate, and then, without fail, find a reason to leave the table early, leaving the dishes, the serving bowls, the mess, and the cleanup entirely to Helen. She never once offered to help. She never once said, "Sit down, I will handle this." She moved through our home the way a guest moves through a hotel, expecting service, leaving disorder, and signing nothing but the guest book on the way out. I watched Helen's face during those moments. She never complained. She would simply press her lips together in a small, dignified line and begin carrying the plates herself quietly, without a word, the way strong women have absorbed the small cruelties of the world for centuries. It broke something in me every single time. I spoke to Paul about it twice. He listened, nodded seriously, and then went home and did nothing. I understood. He was a man caught between the woman he married and the parents who raised him, standing in the middle of a bridge he had not built and could not cross. So I stopped asking Paul to fix it, and I started planning. Helen's 70th birthday fell on a Saturday in early April. We decided to mark the occasion properly. A dinner at our home, the one we had lived in for 35 years, with the good china and the crystal glasses that only appeared on important evenings. I invited the whole family. Paul and Renata, our daughter Sophie and her husband, Helen's sister Margaret, who had driven 4 hours from the coast, and 2 of Helen's oldest friends, Carol and Dottie, women who had known my wife since before she was my wife. What I did not tell Renata was that I had also quietly arranged something else entirely. 3 days before the birthday dinner, I made a phone call. I called a catering company, a discreet, professional one. And I arranged for a full team to arrive at our home on Saturday evening, not to cook. Helen had already prepared most of the food, because cooking for the people she loved was her language, and I would never take that from her. But I hired them to serve, to pour the wine, to clear the plates, to wash every dish, to fold every napkin. Helen did not know. Sophie did not know. Nobody knew except me and the very efficient young woman named Clara, who ran the catering company and asked no unnecessary questions. Saturday arrived. The house smelled of rosemary and roasted garlic and something sweet baking slowly in the oven. Helen moved through the kitchen in her blue dress, humming faintly under her breath, genuinely happy in the way that only certain rare people can be genuinely happy, not despite their age or their difficulty, but because of everything they have earned and survived and chosen to love. The guests began to arrive at 6. Margaret first, then Carol and Dottie, then Sophie and her husband with the grandchildren running ahead of them through the front door. Paul arrived at 6:15. Renata arrived at 6:40, her coat still on, already checking her phone. She swept through the hallway, kissed the air beside Helen's cheek, and made her way to the living room without offering to carry a single thing. At 7 o'clock, I walked to the front door and opened it quietly. Clara and her team stepped inside. 4 of them, neat and professional in pressed dark uniforms. I had briefed them precisely. They took their positions in the kitchen and the dining room without a word. We sat down to dinner. The food was extraordinary. Helen had outdone herself as she always did. Conversation moved around the table the way good conversation should, from laughter to memory to gentle argument, and back to laughter again. Margaret told the story of Helen at 19, that always made Helen cover her face with both hands. The grandchildren made a small disaster of the bread rolls and nobody minded. And Renata sat at the far end of the table, cutting her food into small precise pieces, occasionally offering a thin smile when the conversation swept past her, waiting, I could tell, for the moment the meal would end. Waiting for the moment she could make her excuses and walk out the door, leaving everything behind her as usual. That moment came. Renata set down her fork, began to push back her chair, and said with a bright, dismissive smile, "Lovely as always, Helen. Leave the dishes. Someone will get them." Someone. As if the someone had always been Helen. As if the someone could not possibly be Renata herself. Clara appeared at Renata's elbow before I could say a single word. "Thank you so much," Clara said pleasantly, lifting Renata's plate with practiced ease. "We will take care of everything this evening. Please, enjoy the rest of your night." Renata blinked. She looked at Clara. She looked at the second member of the catering team quietly collecting glasses from the far end of the table. She looked at the third, who was already disappearing into the kitchen with a stack of serving dishes. She looked at me. I looked back at her, perfectly calm, and picked up my wine glass. Helen, seated beside me, had gone very still. Then, slowly, she looked around the table, at the staff moving with quiet efficiency through her dining room, at her grandchildren staring with open curiosity, at Margaret who had pressed her napkin to her mouth to hide her smile. And she laughed. A real laugh. The kind that starts somewhere deep and rises without asking permission. She reached over and took my hand under the table. "You planned this," she said quietly, not as a question. "Someone around here had to," I said. Renata said nothing for the rest of the evening. She left at 8:15, Paul trailing behind her, and I watched her cross the driveway toward their car, her sharp heels clicking against the pavement, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. I do not know what she felt in that moment. Embarrassment, perhaps, or the particular discomfort of a person who has been shown, without a single word of accusation, exactly what they have been failing to be. What I know is what happened inside the house. Helen stayed at the table until nearly 10 o'clock, surrounded by Margaret and Carol and Dottie and the grandchildren, drinking the good wine and talking the way women talk when nobody is rushing them out of the room. Clara's team moved around them like a quiet tide, and when they were finished, every surface gleamed. At the end of the night, Helen stood in the doorway of our clean, quiet kitchen, and she was smiling. Not the pressed, dignified smile she wore when she was absorbing something painful. The other one. The real one. The one I fell in love with 47 years ago in a parking lot outside a university library, when she laughed at something I said, and I thought, that is the person I am going to spend my life making laugh. I stood beside her in the kitchen doorway, and she leaned her head against my shoulder. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I know," I said. "That is why I did it." If this story reminded you that the people who love us quietly deserve to be seen loudly, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are watching this and you know a Helen in your life, do not wait for a birthday. Go find them right now.